Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Indian Photo Festival 2021. This is the 7th year of the Indian Photo Festival, which is India's longest running international photography festival. Today in Artist's Talk, I'd like to welcome Divya Cowasji. Divya is a photographer and documentary filmmaker who lives in a small town in central India. Her work as a documentary filmmaker won her a national award in 2015. She was also awarded the Inlax Shivdasani Scholarship to spend 2 semesters studying analog and alternate processes in photography at the International Center of Photography in New York. Recently, which is last year, she was selected as the recipient of the Indian Photo Festival Grant 2021. Her personal work focuses on the telling of oral histories, on ideas of home and family, memory, place, play, and the body. She is a member of 830, an emerging collective of women photographers from India. Her photographs have shown at the Objectives Women in Film and Photography Showcase Singapore, which was yesterday, day before, and Vantage Point Sharjah, Glasgow Gallery of Photography, and the Angkor Film Photo Festival in Cambodia. I hand over the evening to Divya.
Thank you, Nishat, so much for that introduction and for hosting this evening. Thank you all for making it to watch me share my work, and especially to the India Photo Festival for not just having me at the exhibition, but for giving me this platform to show my work, but also most importantly for having faith in me, seeing something in the work and awarding me the India Photo Festival grant for the last year for 2021. So Remember Me, which I'll be sharing with you today, is basically a very intimate family history told through the material objects that people leave behind, and also through lore, family lore passed on through generations. So about 3 years ago, I lost a lot of family members of a certain generation. So it felt like within a year, like the end of an era, apart from my grandfather, like a whole generation was wiped out. It got me thinking a lot about death, what happens after a person dies, like what happens to the essence of that person, their thoughts, their feelings, the things they love, the things they value, their memories. And through that process, like 2 things happen. One is that when senior members die, you inherit things from them, things they've left for you. And secondly, just the process of someone going, you suddenly have access to their most private lives, their innermost lives, through the process of cleaning out their lives in a sense. So that got me thinking a lot about all these things. Also, my grandfather, who's the storyteller in all our lives, he so from childhood, I've grown up listening to like these fantastical tales that he'd spin, where the heroes, the villains, the fools, they were all actually members of the family, and he himself was a protagonist in a lot of the stories. Like he loves to posit himself as this like bumbling country buffoon. So I feel like I was really fortunate to grow up with this very rich oral history tradition. And in the backdrop of all of this is the ancestral home in which I've grown up, which is about 200 years old. And like the house is like a living, breathing thing in itself. It's like there's so much tangible feeling of all the people who've passed through it, through their things that are all over the place. So I knew that I wanted to do something and make something with all of it. And I sat with these feelings for a very long time. And finally, what I'm showing here today is the work as Remember Me is one way for me to grieve them, these people who've gone, love them, honor them, but most importantly to me, to continue to engage with them in new ways, engage with their lives. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Can you see? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is me in my family home. My parents did up this wall, like this rogues gallery a few years ago, where they dug out like all these old photographs from cartons and all and put this up. And it was a very, it came very naturally to me to be a part, put myself as a part of this work, and to also engage with the things that were left behind in this particular way. Because like growing up in this house, my brother, I, all our friends, cousins, a lot of our play was actually to do with the space of the house itself, but also the things in it. So there was actually a chest that was like a chest of old clothes from my grandmother's, aunts, etc. We used to call it the fancy dress chest, and used to love playing dress up in it, and yeah, just imagining ourselves in different worlds. So it was like a no-brainer to me when I was wondering how to engage with the things they've left behind, and also to make them mine in a way that because they have been left to me, so to give them new life in a way. So yeah, the feeling of play came very naturally. This is my great-grandmother's brooch, and that's her husband's photograph in it, which I've repurposed as a pendant, and her mother's sari left to me by her daughter. There's a quote by Ocean Vuong that really resonated with me. It says, "Here's a room so warm and blood close, I swear you will wake and mistake these walls for skin." It really feels like that sometimes, having this abundance of history and that has been passed down to you. It's like a double-edged sword. It also comes with the burden of being the one who has to cherish that and make it live on in some way. Like, you know, what if I don't want to have children? What happens then? Like, who do I leave all this to in turn? So this work is also somehow my way of resolving that and putting some of it out in the world to, yeah, to make sure it lives on. This is 5 generations of things. There's literally like so much stuff in the house. Sometimes you just feel like, but you can't get rid of anything because there's so much sentimental value attached to each thing. So this is me under my great-great-grandparents' portraits, wearing my maternal grandmother's sari, my great-grandmother's blouse, and my grandmother's watch. This is to me like the utmost symbol of love and care, of when something is left to you intentionally by and intended to last like through generations. The fact that it's always wrapped in muslin cloth with a stick of sandalwood and 2 cloves. Yeah, just so my grand aunt Dinu, she was always impeccably turned out. She was this most stylish woman, and come what may, and towards the end of her life, like her health deteriorated drastically, but no matter what, she would once a week trek to the beauty parlor and have her hair professionally done. She was just so proud of the way she looked, which was amazing. But just shortly before she died, the very last phone conversation that we had, she was in her hospital bed in Switzerland. And I was, me and my mother and how we were on FaceTime with her. And the entire 20 minutes, she expressed so much concern and worry for, you know, the fact that she had carefully acquired over the course of her lifetime, this collection of saris that was very dear to her. And her major concern and worry at that moment, at the end of her life, was, what is going to happen? I'm going to leave them to you, but I feel like you and your mother dress and you prefer a much more casual way of dressing, and these are very heavy silks. What is going to happen? So that is literally the last words I said to Dinu. The last assurances she needed from us is that we were going to love her things, and hopefully pull them off with half as much flair she did. So that is when that really struck me, and that's when this, you know, I started to think about a lot of these things. And a few months later, her suitcases arrived from Switzerland full of her saris, and within them, I don't know whether intentionally or by mistake, but were her hair rollers with her hair in them. And just the fact that I have these silver strands with me that she fussed so much over, it's just really precious. That's Dinu when she was younger. This is the picture of her that's up on the Rogues Gallery, the first wall I showed, and she used to always crib that why is she the only alive person up on that wall. was just such a beautiful picture. So it was up there. And that's me in her saris that she worried we'd never wear. And I wanted sort of like a tongue-in-cheek thing. I've dug out this old frame that my mom and I have been like, what do we fill in this frame? And I put myself within it. Here too, these are more of her old saris. It's also a sort of jab at the fact that one day, hopefully I too will be on a frame up in a wall somewhere, remembered by someone. There's this like frothy saying in the Parsi community, when a person dies, you say, one photo frame ma chali gaya. So yeah. This to me is so symbolic of who Dinu was as a person. She was 83 years old, her very last visit to Mao, and she had me take her to Mao market to have her ears pierced. So there was just that love of life that was incredible. This is my great grandmother's box of treasures that was left to me by Dinu, her daughter, and her other sister. And oh, this is not allowing me to expand. Okay, here. So over here is a letter left to me by, within this box by my great grandmother's son, Jal, who is my grandfather, who I never had the chance of meeting. He died before my parents got married. My darling mummy and daddy, how are you keeping? I love you, and daddy, baby is quite all right. Baby here being Dinu, who I just spoke about. Then there is her own wedding certificate. There are, this is a postcard of her younger brother, who perhaps he drowned at Juhu Beach very shortly after this, trying to save someone from drowning. He was 23 years old. I absolutely love this Janet hairnet, and yeah, it's so fascinating the things someone thought to keep so securely in a box in this fashion. These are pages from my great grandmother's diary, like a slam book. The bottom right is actually an entry by her grandfather, and he's included little notes of music because I believe she studied music. I just love the top left as just a sketch of a little girl crying, and it says jilted. And I love this so much because it's like, especially family members who are of a certain age, we think of them, our grandparents, we think of them occupying such certain roles within our lives. But just you look at something like this and you like, I wonder what happened to her. You know, you imagine this very rich entire life they lived that had nothing to do with you. Oh, and the box of treasures came wrapped in a muslin cloth, which only recently I discovered were actually her bloomers, and they have her inscription, Banu Cowasji. On the left is me in these kors, which are traditional Parsi sari embroidery borders, which are like heirlooms passed down through generations. Of course, that's not the way you're supposed to wear kors. And on the right is my maternal grandmother, Mini Mama, showing you the way it's supposed to be done. And that's taken on Navroz Day. This is her when she was younger. She'd entered a fashion show in college, and the judges had called her a little bit of sunshine. That's her and my grandfather and me shortly after I was born. And you see Mini Mama in this kaftan, which was like, she lived in these kaftans. They are absolute favorite. And I love that even to this day, like, she's preserved them so carefully. They look like they're brand new. It's what she wore like through her life. And this is one of her favorite kaftans in her garden. Shortly after she passed, her garden was in full bloom, and her clothes smelled of her. So I wanted her to have a sit in her garden. So she was like the most precise person and the most phenomenal cook. But her crowning glory was this orange cake. And people would beg her for the recipe, but to no avail. She was taking it to her grave. One day, shortly before about a year before she passed, she'd had a fall. She wasn't doing well. She was bedridden. And she asked to see me alone. And I went, she kicked my grandfather out of the house, not just the room. She's like, you have to get out of the house. Then she pulled her chair made me pull a chair like right up to her and gave me this notepad and pen and said, write. And with her eyes fixed on the ceiling, she recited from memory 5 pages of this orange cake recipe. And I just had my eyes fixed on the page. Neither of us could look at each other. There were tears clogging my eyes because we both knew the enormity of this moment and what she thought this meant, the fact that she was finally passing this recipe on. She never did get to make her cake again. Here's the first page of it in her Tata Capital notebook. I've redacted bits, but I still don't know if she'll see the humor in it. I'm sorry, Granny. So she was an incredibly private person. Every time I drive up to her house, she'd come out to greet me. The moment she'd see a camera in my hand, she'd like turn around and run back into the house. I have so many images of her like retreating into the house like this. And many years ago, she told us that, and she and my grandfather have had the most beautiful relationship for over like 60 years. She told us that she had actually burned all her love letters, all their love letters to each other. And I remember just being so upset by it, like, how could you do this to us? But when she actually passed and us having access to her most private life like that, I understood why she did it. And so even this project, like, there's always like a line in the sand that I'm trying to tread of what is and is not okay. I mean, these people may not be around, but that doesn't stop me from worrying about what their thoughts would be about what I'm doing with their things and their lives. While cleaning out her cupboards, we found an inordinate amount of similar looking handbags, and within each of them, like one comb and one handkerchief and one toothpick. That's me in her house coat, which is like sort of was her uniform at home. And on the right, her slip, which she wore under her dresses, her blouse, and her agyari sadra, which is the religious vest that Zoroastrians wear in the fire temple, sorry. And I don't know if it's slightly sacrilegious that I'm wearing it on my head. That's what I used to do as a kid and pretend I'm like a flying nun. But yeah, I used to enjoy scandalizing her. So I love these so much. She loved her handmade caps. She used to give me so many of her caps. And this is on the left. That's one of Mini Mama's handmade cap contraptions. And on the right is my paternal grandmother, my Dadima's Hollywood wig. And these two things to me are like, could not be more emblematic of how different these women were. They were absolutely like chalk and cheese. These are my Dadima's things. As you can see, she was clearly the life of the party. It's her rhinestone sweater, her moon and star stockings. I used to love playing dress up in her clothes as a child. That's Dadima in a bad mood, 2015. This is my Dadima on the right and another grand aunt on the left. They actually hated each other in real life. So I don't know what's going on in this picture, but they look like they're living their best life. I'm going to read out a little bit here. My Dadima was not an easy woman to love. Glamorous and intelligent to boot, she could charm the pants of a dead tree. But to those who knew her well, she was often manipulative, controlling, a liar, and a lot of the time just seemed like a really not nice person. It was only much, much later in her life that we started to understand a lot of her character flaws as mental illness, and as a family started to treat her infuriating ways with kindness and understanding. By the time my parents were able to step in and medically intervene, it was already much too late, and the physical and mental decline was swift thereafter. When she passed away, I remember feeling really peeved by people who called and said that the woman she really was anyway long dead. This was just a final release. As if I didn't have permission to grieve the loss of the woman her illness had reduced her to. It's true, this strong, fiery, sexual, infuriating, pig-headed woman had been reduced to a mute, crippled, forever smiling simpleton. She had transformed into a little baby, almost an infant needing constant care. And caring for someone in that way, knowing that their survival depends on it, is a very emotionally complex thing. The great irony of it all was that her whole life, all she really wanted, all she hankered after was to be loved. Love me, why does nobody love me? She would thunder and rage at all of us. None of us were ever good enough or did anything right by her. To a child, despite her long spells of loveliness, unmatched generosity in the form of endless presence, and extremely colorful character, these bouts of venomous hysteria and rage did in fact make her seem unlovable. I remember my younger brother declaring at age 4 that he absolutely despised her. And though I knew why he said this, even then it broke my heart. So this is really what struck us towards the end of her life, when she forgot everything, including speech and bodily function. And all she did was smile at us sweetly all day long, was how very much we were able to love her. How everyone rallied around her and cared for her in those final years. And as if she were a newborn baby whom you could grudge nothing, we loved her with the intensity with which one can love a complete innocent. That's Dadima, the last picture I made of her. She used to call me her kabutar for reasons I still don't understand. And throughout her life, all the gifts she gave me were kabutar themed. This is the one of the few ones that remained. And kabutar means dove or pigeon. This is now a favorite. And if the thing wasn't kabutar themed, she would like draw a kabutar on it or write kabutar. This is when I'd gone to boarding school in Rajasthan. She came and visited me and she was shocked at how hot it was. So for those years, she gifted me so many fans. I even had one which was like a cap, a contraption, which was a cap and an electric fan with a huge kabutar drawn on it. Needless to say, I never wore it. This hand fan survived. These are posters of her. This is my Dadima. I found these posters in a vintage store in Delhi several years ago. She was a movie star for exactly a decade in the 50s. She made about 25 films. She never spoke of this time of her life. Even no one in the family has really seen her films until very recently. The only anecdote I remember her telling me is that once there was this close-up of her eyes in this movie where she's looking left and looking right, and that the censor board had insisted on cutting that scene out from the film because her eyes were simply too seductive. But Dadima used to make up all sorts of tales, so one isn't really sure what was what. Several years into her illness, she was already by this time bedridden, catatonic, had forgotten language, movement, everything. And she and I were alone at home. The doorbell rang, and it was two grown men in their 70s, perhaps, who said they were her ardent fans since boyhood. They heard she lived there, and they'd come from very far and wanted to pay their respects. And I said no, which is the line we'd been giving everyone, that we didn't want her fans to see her in this way, that she deteriorated so much. So, and they were absolutely crestfallen. They begged and pleaded and said, please, we've come from so far. So finally, they agreed to leave their phones outside so they wouldn't take any pictures of her. And they said, we just want to touch her feet and pay our respects. And very skeptically, I wheeled on the wheelchair out into the living room, and they came. And what unfolded is one of the most magical things I've ever seen. These two grown men turned to absolute putty with one look at her. And they started like jabbering off these details about her career, which I doubt even she knew. And then they began to sing and dance. And they sang all of her songs. And at one point, this old man was on the floor, gyrating, doing her dance moves. And it's as if she knew, because she was just giving them the most coy, shy smile, nervous giggle. She was batting her eyelashes at them. And they were just like hit through the heart. They said that her beauty still pierced them through the heart, that she was their dream girl. And they spent 2 hours with us, and it was just so full of unadulterated joy and love. And I just could not fathom. I was just in awe of this shrunken being sitting next to me, who without my knowledge, like this part of her life that I had no idea about, had done something so tremendous that 50 years later, these two men were paying her this most bizarre yet fitting tribute in our living room. So yeah, I hope she knew what was going on. I think she knew. This is a short, few clips of a video I've put together of footage I was able to acquire of her in the various avatars that I have known her. So.
मेरी जिंदगी आज रात झूम ले, आसमां को चूम ले, किसको पता है कल आए कि ना आए, फिर ऐसा समा मिलेगा कहाँ, फिर ऐसा समा मिलेगा कहाँ, यही जिंदगानी के दिन है, मरना तो सबको है, जी के भी देख ले, चाहत तो एक जो जी के भी देख ले।
Sorry, girl.
Where did you go after that?
Yes.
To any more clubs?
For my parents?
From my parents? Did they take you?
Yes. क्या करेंगे?
क्या कर रहे हैं? I love you, दादी माँ. Asu is coming.
Yes.
So that was Dadima. This is my grandfather's house. This is the actual room in which he was born, on this very bed. It was in 1928. That's the same year that electricity came to my house. So he loves to say that he brought the light. I think he did. And hanging here is his elder sister, my grand aunt. The way I knew her entire life, the last 10 years of her life, which is when I was around, she was completely paralyzed, bedridden, couldn't move at all. She had to be carried from place to place, and she spent her life in this bed. But much before that, and what's hanging here is this, one of her nighties she gifted to my mother. And as a child, it always just fascinated me so much, because all I could see was this really old lady in so much pain who couldn't do anything. And it enthralled me that she had this other life where she would have worn something so sexy. This is one of our most prized family heirlooms. This is my grandfather at 8 years old on the left, with a most pompous, precocious letter, which I'm about to read out, to King George on the occasion of his coronation in 1937. My ever dear George, I hope this will find you quite hale and hearty, and so am I. I can't see the side of my screen. Yeah. George, you will be surprised to know that this letter is written by the youngest member of the Khan Bahadur Ilawas family, and Master Feroz is running in the 8th year of his life. It was my earnest desire to see you in your coronation dress. I was going to come to your place to attend that memorable ceremony, but due to my young age, my dear mummy did not allow me to leave the shores of India. She is a very noble mummy, but I did not like this argument of hers. Don't you think, dear George, that now I am sufficiently big enough to take care of myself? But never mind, I'm an obedient son of my parents, so I did not feel much about it. Anyhow, I would like to have a photo of your own self in your coronation dress. Please send it at your earliest convenience at the above address. How is your dear brother, Duke of Windsor? Do let me know about his whereabouts. I want to communicate with him. Do remember me to your wife and daughters. There is nothing more to write for the present, more when we meet in London. With best of love and tons of kisses, your ever loving Feroz. Well. So over here we have my grandfather's uncle, Bejanji Kaka was this real wheeler dealer. He used to sell Ayurvedic products door to door. And my grandfather says that when he was around 18, 19 years old, he started to have an inordinate amount of hair fall where they all thought he's going to lose all his hair. So Bejanji Kaka concocted this oil for him. And this is the recipe which we found recently of that oil. And it really worked. So he then made it professionally and gave my grandfather an entire crate of this oil. And the only problem was that it used to stink to the high heavens. Now, my grandfather's never had a sense of smell. He's never been able to smell. So my grandmother only half jokingly used to say that the oil helped grandpa's hair, but it ruined our sex life. So anyway, on one of our daily ritualistic evening walks, about 3-4 years ago, my grandfather told me that, Bejanji Kaka gave me this carton of this oil and it's lasted me my whole life. And I'm on the last bottle and there's only about this much left. And I've harbored this secret feeling that the moment the oil finishes, so will my life. So it sent me into this complete panic. And couldn't sleep all night. The next morning, I went to their house to, try and figure out where this bottle of oil is and to steal it and hide it. And as it turned out, that little bottle of oil disappeared. None of us could locate it. We don't know where it went. So while my poor grandfathers had to switch to regular coconut oil, I sleep a little easier every night. And I'm going to end this here for right now. So over the process of my grandfather being the storyteller in all our lives for so many years, he now recently, while trying to recall some details, said to me, I seem to have forgotten more than I can remember. So this is me hoping to pick up the mantle and keep his memories and all these memories alive through him for a little bit longer. I think I'm at time, so I'm going to stop right now, stop sharing screen.
Thank you, Divya, for this absolutely wonderful, moving love letter to your family, for bringing them alive, and for being so generous with it. And also for redacting, unfortunately, your grandmother's recipe. I'm like, can I get that already?
She'd be so irritated even that I put that out there. I know it. Yeah.
How did you decide what you would keep and what you would not? And was there any blowback from your family? Have they seen it?
To be honest, of course, everyone knows what I've been up to, and I've been running around the house in these strange outfits with all my equipment, and they've seen bits and bobs here, but here and there. But I think my parents are probably seeing the whole thing in its entirety as it stands right now at this talk. But as far as consent goes, if and when I reach them and their generation, that will be a whole different kettle of fish. Right now, my chief collaborator is my grandfather, and he has been I have been greedily recording his stories for over 10 years now, and it's also been interesting to see how the same stories told over a lifetime have now started to change, details change, things get obliterated. But also he's but he's been really happy with this whole process and collaboration. He doesn't quite understand what I'm trying to do with the form and the photos, and also why would anyone else care about any of this. But he's an oversharer. So to the point where I'd asked him to do this almost 12 years ago when I was in college, write down the stories of what I considered the main events in his life. And my grandmother got really angry at that point because there were some details that were in there that she clearly didn't want even me knowing. So she said, you can't just put everything down in writing. So I am very conscious of that, even as I said before, of knowing what things would just be too much to put out there, and sort of trying to have some sort of balance when even things like I mentioned in the anecdote I told about those fans who came to see my grandmother, that that no, we don't want anyone to see her in this state, which is what we used to say at that point a lot. Newspapers used to come want to take pictures of her. We'd say, no, we don't want anyone to remember her like this. And then when I was putting this video together and I was using those bits of her right in the end in bed when she's not really coherent and stuff, and and I had a conversation with my mother, and I wasn't sure, and then I thought about it, and I think that even what we were saying at that point, that she wouldn't like this because she was very proud of the way she looked, etc. But that was us. That was never her having said that. It was us projecting, I think, our discomfort with mental illness and what that does, and like the mental and physical deterioration that can cause, especially in an elderly person. And I decided it is something I do want to talk about. I just hear so much of it, even around me at a familiar level, like people talking about how older people just lose it, and it's just like, it's not a character flaw. They like to treat mental illness with a little bit more sensitivity, and also, like, we have a lot of it in my family. So at some point, taking stock and reckoning with the possibility that this could be part of our inheritance too. So in fact, there's a project I've been working like a little bit side by side, dealing with my own struggles with clinical obsessive compulsive disorder since I was a child. So yeah, I very consciously decided that I'm not okay with this being a secret, or like not being spoken about, because I think it's important. So
Yeah, it is. I think we sort of hide far more than the people who are, so it actually, we think it's, or we're ashamed of it, actually, basically, unfortunately. So I know you came to you came to photography via filmmaking. And even your film, the one that won the national award, is a love letter to the Parsis. It's about being a Parsi and what you consider it. So how did you transition from being a filmmaker to being a photographer? Is there a transition, or is it just part of the same storytelling?
No, I see it as a definite transition. So when I was, from like my earliest documentary film, which was my student film, I out of necessity one day just had to pick up the camera. I didn't even know, like, I got a crash course and this is how you put it on, this is what you look through, you focus. And instantly I was like, wow, I really enjoyed that. So I continued to shoot my own films for a while. I don't think I was any good at it, but I really loved it. And then one day I was, a few years later, I wasn't very well. I was in hospital for a prolonged period of time, and my friends had like gifted me a bunch of books to buy at the time. And one of them was Just Kids by Patti Smith. And I loved the book, but it had these black and white photos by her then lover, Robert Mapplethorpe, in them. And this is pre-social, it's not pre-social media, it's pre-social media in my life. I was like very lived under a rock, and I never engaged with photography really in any way other than magazines. So I was just blown away. I said, oh my God, what is this? I spent all night Googling him. Then through him, I reached like Sally Mann, etc. And this like whole world of the still image. And I was just shocked at how much it made me feel. I think I love the fragmented nature of it. The fact that it like holds space for so much mystery and secrets. And yes, you can make your own out of so much of it. It's like poetry. So yes, and I see them as two quite different practices. I actually don't see them converging that much.
Is Just Kids also something that gave you the form to this series, or is that something that you arrived at later? The fact that you have book, you have storytelling.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Sorry, I said, did Just Kids also give you sort of the form to this series that you've done?
No, not at all. That was like many years ago. This particular work, I was like, so as I said, after this very heavy year, we lost so many people who were like really important to us. And like I sat with this grief for a long time, not knowing. I knew I wanted to do something because I feel I express myself, and you need an outlet for your emotions. But I didn't know what form it would take. But then slowly, as I started to imagine frames, and I think it's the same notebook. It's very different from how I've ever done any work. Normally, it's much more like spontaneous and but here, this is like a year before I ever started shooting. I actually made sketches of like the things I wanted, and like this is the one with the photo frame and me. So I had very sort of fixed ideas of what I wanted, and I also envisioned, because there were these very formal sort of portraits, it was my dream to shoot it all in large format. But of course, the logistics of that, and then COVID happened, and I was at home, and I said, no, I want to do this right now. So I just picked up my digital camera, and sort of out of necessity and everything, like the form just happened. I also do envision it, like when I started making it, I envision it as a book. So I feel like the text and images go side by side. I don't yet know at all what final form that's going to take, and that's okay. But there's so much still to work with. So yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, I guess when you have a history that's as rich and as enthralling, and and so much of it's still with you, it will take you some time to get through it, I guess. Yeah. I believe you're building a darkroom at home. How is that coming along, and when did you start that?
It's embarrassingly long. So at the same time, when I like started to fall in love with photography, I realized there's a very certain type of photos that I'm gravitating towards. At least at that time, they were all analog, black and white, also a lot of all processes. So I was like, where do I learn this? Where do I learn this? I couldn't find anywhere in India at the time. There was like Goa Cap, but it had shut down. Again, this is pre-Instagram and Facebook for me. So it's just like Googling all the time. And then for 2-3 years, I just didn't know what to do. And then I was lucky enough to get the Inlak Shivdasani grant to go, and it wasn't a structured course, but it was like short workshops to learn like the skill set that I wanted. And like, I knew I like completely fell in love with the darkroom and all processes and all. But when I came back here, I was so lost, because like, how do I do this? There's no infrastructure. So then I decided that I wanted to start my own thing, and it took me a while to like work, save up, build a sort of darkroom, and now that's all in place. But then when I got down to it, I said, oh Lord, like over there, like the darkrooms in New York, there's like ready-made chemistry flowing out of the taps, and here you make stuff from scratch, and the moment chemistry is involved, like my brain shuts down. So the space is entirely ready. And in January, thanks to the Murthy Nayak Foundation and Srinivas, I'm going to be attending a little workshop where they will show you how to do this in the context here, like the mixing of all the base chemicals and everything. So once that is done, I have practiced a little and know what I'm doing. I'm not going to like burn down the house. I want to make it a sort of space, a community darkroom space where people can come and learn, or they can just take the place and do what they want with it. So yeah, it's completely ready, and hopefully in the beginning of the coming year it should get fully functional.
Oh, that's amazing. And also that you're opening it out to community, which will be like really, because right now you can find like one person per city to do some black and white or
in the
last
few years, or maybe just because I'm on Instagram and just more clued in now, but there are a few places doing it amazingly. There's Kanike in Bangalore, there's Maze in Delhi, Murthy Nayak. So there are small pockets, but I think that's the only way to make analog sustainable, is to actually have a bunch of dark rooms and things all over where people can. So I know even in the area, like Indore is close to us. I know several photographers there who are really interested. They just don't have the wherewithal. So hopefully, yeah, this is a step in forming some sort of community.
Right. And did being in Mao help you either to focus or to, actually, did it give you the time to come up with different projects to do, or was it too stressful because of COVID?
I mean, yeah, there were times during COVID where, as we know what was happening in this country, one couldn't focus at all. But by and large, I think it was it's like being in that environment is so calm that you have to really like push yourself to get any work done at times. But it's also great to create in that kind of space, and yeah, in those surroundings.
Right. You were also talking about community, and you're part of 830, which is a women's
collective.
Sorry. What are the aims, and how does it help?
So 8:30 started out of actually during lockdown. Riti, who is one of the members, she was Riti Sen Gupta. She was like quarantining all alone in Pune, where she didn't know anyone, was feeling extremely, I think, cut off and isolated. And anyway, photography is such an isolating practice. So I think she was just really feeling the urge to connect with like-minded people and to, have just have a sense of community. So she reached out to 2-3 people she knew through the Angkor workshops. They'd done them together. Then it sort of spiraled and someone reached out. It was all like people we knew online. A few of us had done this Guldasta showcase together. So when she reached out initially, it was since we are all relatively free, let's take this time, let's make something together. So that was the intent with which we initially came together. And also everyone was a bit skeptical, like, because, we don't know if people will stay on, like, what is the staying power, how much people will commit. And then week after week after week, we all just kept showing up. I think we like fell in love with each other, and getting to know each other through our work has been a really special process. And then slowly we realized that the thing we wanted to make became secondary. It just became so much about talking about our practices, and there's just not many spaces, especially for photographers who are starting out, if you've not had educational backgrounds, within the art space. So it's been really nice. We still are now. We are finally like back on track at what we want to make and put out, and then hopefully figure out how to engage further with the photo community. But yeah, it's been a really nice support system to have.
Oh, that's amazing. Did you find that in India you don't have that many women's collectives, or are there many, and you just have to find your own, something to be part of?
I don't think there are that many, at least not those that are extremely active. And I think we just wanted this to feel like a safe space where we could like say and be ourselves outside of the confines of like an art world, where I think many people have had like not great experiences, etc. So I think it's a great thing to like try and build as well, more spaces like this. And we're also trying to figure out how to open up this space that we have to other people and take it forward. Once we get our whatever our object is that we are making out of the way, then hopefully we'll be able to move on and do that as well.
Okay, we'll be looking forward to that. I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience now, and we've got one which says, how important are grants to continue one's work, and how did winning the Indian Photo Festival help the grant at the Indian Photo Festival help you with this project?
I think grants are so important in this. So I was just telling Nishad before we started that I used to work as a documentary filmmaker, where everyone used to say, oh, you need to supplement your income with some real work. And now that I'm a photographer, like the documentary filmmaking is what's sustaining me, ironically. So I think grants are really the only way that people can take time off from hustling and focus their energies into making their own work and their work of value. So I think that there need to be so many more grants in an ideal world. Like it's definitely key in me being able to take the time off and focus on this.
All right. And do you have any tips or anything that, for emerging photographers or for photographers in general, or something that you wish you had known when you started out and now you do know?
My tips.
Learnings.
I think there's like this, like to not feel pressurized to be creating work all the time. Like it's okay to slow down. The one tip would be, yes, have some other source of income, because it's really, at least initially, it's not very sustainable. So have something that makes you feel secure, and then take the time to really work on what you want to, what means something to you. And because it just feels like otherwise, especially being on Instagram and stuff, that people are just creating all the time and putting out there. And so I think that's a mug's game and it's not really necessary. And the other thing would be to somehow find like people who occupy similar spaces as you, whose work you also respect, and try and build community with your own peers, except instead of, you know, with people who are very senior to you in the hopes that they will somehow help you out. I think like having community at your level is really important and very rewarding, and to be able to grow together with each other. Yeah.
Right. We've got a question from Akash Joshi, who says, do you find it easier to photograph similar spaces, i.e. home and family members, or say someone who you have not known for a while?
Right. So even like with my work as a documentary filmmaker, is like really drilled in our head about this idea of representation and how complex it is, and who do you have the right to represent, and what all politics is going on when you're doing that with someone else. So I actually thought I was being pretty smart by like turning the lens inward, but it's not easy there either. Like it's like, especially when family is involved in a family archive, there are a lot of things to navigate. And I mean, where the onus of knowing whether what you have done is ethical or not is up to you and your judgment entirely, pretty much. But yeah, I definitely feel, to answer your question, I definitely feel more productive and more conducive to making work in environments that I'm very comfortable in. In fact, strangely, like if I go on a holiday or to a new place, I never take out my camera. My friends are like, what sort of a photographer are you? Never taking pictures. Like they are all clicking away. Just I like to document situations that I'm very comfortable in, that I know intimately, because I feel then I can bring out something about them that feels true to me, to the space. Yeah.
Another question is, how do you build the discipline to actually do some work at home? How do you do it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you should ask my parents. It's not the easiest thing. I think you need to learn to schedule at some point, and even sort of, if you're just sitting at home and working from home, like have some sort of like office hours. I'm going to be working during this time. Having said that, like for me, I can't be creative on a clock. Like it comes, it's not a fixed thing. So I usually end up shooting a project like this over, say, 4 days, spread over time, where I've worked morning to night on that day. But it's not, yeah, I find it hard to sustain. I work better in spurts. Yeah, I'm not
sure. Are you saying this project was shot in 4 days?
No, not 4 days, but maybe a week.
Wow, that's amazing.
But like I said, like I had planned everything in my head to the T on this particular project. I had practically drawn out each frame beforehand. So, I mean, the organizational bits are done, just the actual execution.
And is that the way you approach all projects, or was that specific to this one?
Specific, I think that's the way. There are a few things I'm working on that are like on the self, and that's the way I seem to work best when I'm just left to myself. That's the way I seem. Of course, when it's commissioned work and stuff, it's completely different. But yeah, that is the way I tend to.
Right. We've got a follow-up question to the earlier one from Akash, which says that what are the ethical considerations of photographing home and family?
The ethical considerations are, like I touched a bit on earlier, is that even though most of the people I'm dealing with are no longer there, that doesn't mean I don't worry about what they would think about the way they are being represented. So because I mean, at the end of the day, it is their story told through my eyes, so there's nothing objective about it. But I still want to make sure it's done in a way that is respectful, that yeah, at the end of the day, I have to be comfortable, because I love these people, right? I cherish them. So I want to make sure that they are honored. That doesn't necessarily mean I only show like the good in them or one-sided, but I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror and know that I've done it in the most respectful way possible. So, yeah.
Right. I hope Akash, that answers your question. We've got a question from Pooja Troch, who says, what are your reflections about the art world in India? And what would you like to see getting better in our country regarding the arts?
To be honest, I have not really put myself out there that much to have like a very well-formed opinion of an art world. I do know that before say I happened to be lucky enough to be with a community like 830, it did feel very intimidating and like you're a bit unsure as a young artist of how to put yourself out there. And who do you approach for advice? You're always worried of being shot down, or I just feel like we need to build more community spaces that are less hierarchical in nature, because it feels like there are a few like people who are like the stronghold of power, or of influence, and so to find alternate ways of being where you don't have to fit in within those structures, is if people are able to navigate around that, I think that's useful and helpful.
Right, we have a question about, thank you. We have a question about, what are the other projects you're working on, your other current projects?
So I am working on a documentary film that has been 4 years in the making now, with my brother Jal, who's also a filmmaker. It is about, so basically, the stalwarts of Parsi theatre. Parsi theatre used to be huge in Bombay during the 70s and 80s, and then there's been like 30 years of complete decline. So about a few years ago, the Parsi theatre greats, who are now all in their 80s and 90s, came back to do one final show as a tribute to them, to the stage. And I documented that whole process with no intention of it being a film, just to document and maybe hand over the stuff to them. And once that got over, I realized that I'm sitting on something pretty special. But because it was not shot with the intention of making it into a film, I just went with my DSLR and like followed them around for the whole time of rehearsals. So it's taken me almost 3 years, me and my brother, to make sense of it and what to do with it. And now it's finally a film that I'm trying to get out into the world and figure out now the part about how to market this, how to perhaps monetize this, but maybe where will it be able to be shown. And the other is, like I mentioned a little bit about, I'm working on a personal project on photographing. It's again a series of self-portraits, largely on my struggles with obsessive compulsive disorder through my life, which I've only sort of really come to terms with, made peace with in the last 4 or 5 years, and got to talking about, etc. So it's again a lot about mental health, about women depicting their own madness as opposed to it being from an exterior male gaze. And yeah, that's sort of what I'm working on. And this thing with 830, where we're doing a collaborative project at the moment, which is going to be an amalgamation of a lot of our work.
That's amazing. We're looking forward to your work, and I think you're getting a lot of love from everybody who's listening to you, who would love to see your work in the future as well.
Thank you.
And thank you for being part of the Indian Photo Festival. Thank you for this artist's talk, and thank you for sharing your family with so much love and humor and just depth with us. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you everyone really for coming. It really means a lot. I'm going to read through all the comments.
Yes. All right. Good night, everybody. The Indian Photo Festival continues till 19th of December, and there'll be more artist talks coming up. Good night.